director can put it right in front of the audience and no one notices until they want you to. Spoilers for some movies that are a little old at this point, but think Fight Club or The Sixth Sense. If you're really paying attention, and I mean really paying attention, you can pick up on these twists, but no one ever does. And similarly, the movie I'm talking about today has no problem hiding its twist in plain sight. It's a movie called R Point, and I want to do something a little different with this video. If you've seen the movie, you know the twist. But if you haven't, I'm going to be showing you the twist as much as I possibly can until we hit this timestamp. And genuinely, I want to see if you're able to spot it, because I really don't think you're able to. Good luck, don't forget to subscribe. I'm Nightmare Movies, and let's get started. The year is 1972, and this is Lieutenant Choi, a man with a history of getting the platoons he leads into trouble. 6 months ago, there was a search team, Donkey 30, that disappeared at the R Point, a strategic island near Saigon. The night before, South Korean soldiers received a radio transmission from Donkey 30 saying that they were all going to die, repeating this phrase over and over and over again. And now, Lieutenant Choi, along with 8 other soldiers, are going to be sent to R Point to rescue any surviving members of Donkey 30. They have 1 week to do so, and if they're successful, every single one of them gets a plane ride home out of the war and an honorable discharge. Sounds like a pretty sweet deal for such a simple mission. Well, this is a horror movie, so we know that things aren't about to go as smoothly as promised. The platoon walks onto the shore and begins their long trek to reach R Point. As they make their way through the dense forests, they're suddenly ambushed and an intense firefight breaks out. Lieutenant Choi attempts to keep his soldiers calm and, most importantly, alive. He takes a rocket launcher, flanks the enemy, and after the firefight is finished, the platoon investigates the trench and finds just one lone Vietnamese woman and a corpse that's been sitting there in the trench with her for a long, long time. And after searching the woman, Lieutenant Choi decides to spare her life, and the troops continue on with their mission. After this encounter, the team has officially arrived at R Point. Upon their arrival, they discover a gravestone that gives a little history on this area. R Point was originally a lake, a location that the Chinese used to kill and dump Vietnamese into before it was filled, and a temple was built on top of it. The last part of the inscription on the gravestone reads, "Those who have blood on their hands." And that's it. Well, until one of the soldiers decides to piss on the grave, and the full inscription says, "Those who have blood on their hands will not return." An ominous message without a doubt. And with that, the troops head in to find their missing comrades. They decide to stop and rest in an open field. Some of the troops sleep as the others watch guard and talk about their superstitions. Something feels off about this place. And even watching the film, you get that sense. Like they're not supposed to be here. Like anything alive isn't supposed to be. And the next morning, Lieutenant Choi is awoken to give base camp an update on their mission. But as they do, Lieutenant Choi spots something. Somehow, this large, abandoned building has literally appeared out of thin air. The troop slowly approaches it and starts to clear it out, checking every nook and cranny of this building, but ultimately finding nothing except for this little radio. After clearing the building, Lieutenant Choi puts together a plan. They have 7 days to retrieve proof of whether the other team is alive or dead. This building is in the center of R Point, and the rest of the search area is spread over a 3.5 kilometer radius. We also learn that the area of R Point is considered holy ground to the Vietnamese, or maybe a better term would be cursed. So therefore, the Vietnamese soldiers aren't really going to enter this area, making it the perfect place for their base camp. So the plan is to cover the most ground possible by splitting into 2 teams. Definitely one of the oldest plans in horror, but in this case it makes sense. But before they head out on their search, one of the soldiers asks what unit the missing soldiers belong to. Battalion 53 is the answer, a unit that one of the soldiers here was actually a part of. But there's not much time to dwell on the details. They have 6 more days to find the missing soldiers, and so the search begins. Half of the group stays in the building for now while the other half goes out to search. While out on their search, one of the soldiers, Corporal Joe, has to take a piss break. But without noticing, it seems that his team has abandoned him. And this is where we get one of the creepier scenes in the film. Corporal Joe searches all over the area for his team, but he's unable to find them. That is until he enters this open field with this tall grass. There he sees his team slowly moving forward towards something. As Corporal Joe runs to rejoin them, the other soldiers slowly sink into the grass. Confused, he naturally does the same, assuming that they've been spotted or they're about to get into some sort of fight. But there's something off, because once he rises out of the grass, it looks like all of the other soldiers have disappeared. And this is our first real evidence that something is off with our point. Now, eventually he gets reunited with his team and tries to rationalize what he saw. But I think at this point, we all know they aren't dealing with something they can rationalize. But before they can discuss anything further, they hear a helicopter outside, and arriving is a group of American soldiers. They explain to our team that every 4 days they come here to check the batteries in the building's second floor. But they also explain something else. A lot of soldiers have died here, not just Vietnamese. Historically, this is where mass murders took place. And on that eerie note, the Americans leave, betting that when they return in 4 days, no one there is going to be alive. After leaving, our soldiers need some way to unwind and relieve their stress. So to do so, they have a little dance party. And it looks like it's helping. They scream and holler and dance to that radio that they found until the music stops. But it doesn't just stop. It's replaced by the horrified screams of soldiers. Even turning off the radio, however, doesn't mean that the paranormal happenings just stop. Throughout the night, the troops become more and more paranoid. Private Chung walks aimlessly through the grass, and our lieutenant catches quick flashes of the same woman who ambushed them from earlier, dressed in all white and suddenly disappearing. Bookending night 2 with an unsettled team and paranormal activity that is slowly escalating. By morning, most of the group is on edge and looking to distract themselves in any way possible. 2 of our 9 soldiers sit outside, smoke cigarettes, and try to calm each other down by talking about what they're gonna do when they get home. But their conversation is quickly interrupted. Out of nowhere, blood drips onto the soldiers, and when they look up, they discover that one of their comrades, Private Chung, has hung himself. Now worried that Vietnamese soldiers might be picking them off one by one, they head out, set up traps around the perimeter, and when they're finished, they head back to the not-so-safe building, where they finally have established radio communication with their base camp. Lieutenant Choi informs Captain Park that Private Chung has been killed, but this only causes more confusion. You see, Private Chung shouldn't have been there in the first place, because Private Chung is a member of the missing team they're looking for. Lieutenant Choi doesn't believe him, saying that they counted 10 soldiers and now there are only 9. But according to their captain and the official report, only 9 of them were sent to our point. So I want to ask you, how many did you count? Let's bring it back to the beginning, at the docks. We can count all 9 of our troops easily enough. But once they arrive on the island, things start to change. Here, for instance, the first time we see them all in a wide establishing shot. How many are there now? Let's keep going. Here, 10 soldiers. Here, 10 once again. And if you're thinking to yourself that this movie isn't very clever, it's just hiding this in wides, how about this shot? Still not convinced? Let's move in even closer. I can't remember the last time I rewound a movie to check what I was missing. And I definitely can't remember the last time that it was so blatantly in front of me, and I just didn't catch it. Our point has confidently been showing us the twist for the last 15 minutes, and almost every single shot after they land on this island, you can count off on the group and notice that there are 10 soldiers almost every time. And it's so confident that you won't pick up on the clues that it blatantly shows you the member who has not spoken and has been following them this whole time. It's not even trying to hide the fact that this is a possibility either. A building appears out of nowhere. The ghost of a woman they killed is seen staring at them. Hell, Corporal Joe literally encounters the ghosts of the troops. The Americans even tell them that this place is haunted, and we as the audience believe them. Obviously we do. But just when you think you know how this movie operates, it throws that twist right in your face to show you that you weren't paying nearly enough attention to what's going on. And that's what makes a good twist. Now from this point on, the movie really amps up the paranormal and bodies start to drop. Now at this point, you probably already predicted a good amount of the other twists in this film, but I'll go over them and get to our ending. It turns out that the Americans that visited them were also spirits, and as the movie goes on, the group slowly starts to realize that they are going to be joining the many soldiers before them to be trapped in our point forever. No matter what they do to try and escape, it doesn't work out. They all begin to become extremely paranoid, and rightfully so. It even seems that they're being hunted by the spirits of the soldiers who came before. This all culminates in the group meeting back at the building, where they're finally able to call for a chopper to come and rescue them from this nightmare. But the only problem is that it won't be arriving until 5:50 in the morning. So with one final night here, all bets are off, and the spirits decide to kill everyone. To do so, one by one, the spirits possess the remaining members of the squad and start killing off other soldiers, until the only people that remain are Sergeant Zhang and Lieutenant Choi. Inside Zhang's pocket, Lieutenant Choi finds a picture of an old French troop with one particular person standing out from the group. The same young Vietnamese woman who's been haunting Lieutenant Choi. Suddenly, she appears behind him. She slowly approaches him, but not wanting to be possessed and hurt the last remaining member of his squad, Lieutenant Choi yells to Sergeant Zhang, instructing him to shoot him. And Sergeant Zhang does just that, killing Lieutenant Choi and being rescued by the helicopter in the morning. The final shot is a transmission being played over these old radios, beckoning more people to come to our point. And that is the end of the film. Now, I just want to get back to my original talking point with this video. Something that is so impressive to me is when a film can hide its twist in plain sight and the audience never catches on. With Our Point's main twist specifically, it gave this movie so much more rewatch value. I went back multiple times to check and see if I missed the signs, to count all the members in every single shot, and how often they were really showing this. And I have to say, it's a lot. I'm not kidding when I say that at almost every point you can count off 10 members in the group, even in shots where they're split apart. It's even more highlighted by the fact that we slowly get to know more and more about each of these characters, all except for the one that wasn't really there. Though this is also where I have to set some realistic expectations if you decide to go and watch this film. While I can say without a doubt there is an extremely well-crafted atmosphere here and some genuinely creepy scenes, Our Point unfortunately suffers from what I like to call 2000s horror. Scenes that would otherwise be tense and unnerving lose that by being a little too flashy and sometimes cheesy in their presentation. And while we discuss the main twist of this film, there are plenty more that are way less subtle and predictable. Ones I imagine you picked up on trying to figure out what twist I was talking about. But weirdly enough, in doing that, it hides the main twist so effectively that my point still stands. And I still do recommend this movie. It's a unique horror film that has a lot of charm and a lot of genuinely great ideas. It's not often that war films and horror films mix, but I've always found it to be an interesting combination. I didn't want to spoil too much of the other twists and turns and scares, so give this one a shot if this movie at all sounds interesting to you. And with all that being said, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'm Nightmare Movies. And I'll see you all next time. This is writer, director, and producer Sam Raimi, a man who by all accounts needs no introduction. For over 40 years, he has been giving us classic films that span over multiple genres. Now this man, on the other hand, is Shinichi Fukuzawa, someone who I doubt you've ever heard of, let alone seen any of his work. So what could him and Sam Raimi possibly have in common? All the way back in 1981, Sam and his longtime friend Bruce Campbell secured $90,000 to start principal photography on his genre masterpiece, The Evil Dead. While the film itself went on to become quite a cultural hit within the horror world, not all was sunshine and rainbows behind the scenes. The production was plagued with constant setbacks, including getting lost in the woods on the first day of shooting and crew members getting injured. Raimi also loved tormenting his actors. In his own words, he said, "If everyone was in extreme pain and misery, that would translate to a horror." And it seemed he accomplished his goal, even though Bruce Campbell called it, quote, 12 weeks of mirthless ruthless exercise in agony. The film went on to make almost $3 million at the worldwide box office. With its success, this little low-budget flick would spawn 2 sequels, a TV show, and inspire more aspiring filmmakers than I could possibly count. And this is where Shinichi comes into the story. Inspired by these films, in 1995, he would embark on an almost 20-year-long process of making his own low-budget horror feature. A film that has been dubbed by fans as the Japanese Evil Dead. And that's exactly what we're going to be discussing today. I'm Nightmare Movies, and today I want to introduce you to one of the most batshit insane films that I have ever seen, and with a mouthful of a title: Bloody Muscle Bodybuilder in Hell. Before we start though, I do want to say that tickets for a Baroque Film Festival are officially live. It's a one-day event that me and Sam Hell will be hosting in Los Angeles, California on November 22nd. It is an 18-year-old and up event, and IDs are going to be checked at the door. I'll also be moderating a Q&A with the cast and crew of the new American Guinea Pig film, so come hang out. And if you want to see some wild horror films, get your tickets now. I'll leave a link in the comments down below. This movie has a fascinating story, so before we jump into the film itself, I want to just let you all know what went into the creation of it. All the way back in 1995, Shinichi and his 2 supporting actors began shooting this feature film at Shinichi's father's house that was going to be demolished. And as the title of the video says, this was practically a one-man show. Shinichi served as writer, director, producer, editor, special effects artist, and of course, the leading actor. He stated that he loved the Evil Dead films and that this movie was a tribute to them. But his main reason for actually making it was because, quote, "I wanted to be like Bruce Campbell's Ash from the Evil Dead, and I wanted to kick zombies around like him. I happened to be working out then and I was training myself, so I figured I should make use of that too." As you're going to see, this movie has a lot of charm to it, just like Evil Dead, and just like in the production of Evil Dead, this film was also plagued with setbacks and problems. Apparently, while shooting, several rolls of film went missing, and the main shooting location, Shinichi's father's house, had an insect infestation. The film was also constantly being reshot all the way up until 2009, and it wasn't until 2010 where the film would have a final cut. The film was then, of course, self-released by Shinichi on about 100 burned DVDs in 2012, then would luckily see an official Japanese release in 2014, followed by a release in the UK in 2017, and eventually being released in the US in 2022. And now that you really understand the history of this film, it's time for you all to experience over 20 years of hard work. The film starts by introducing us to Shinichi's father's house, a location we're going to become very familiar with over the next 62 minutes. Inside, we get an electric start to the film. A woman is trying to murder her boyfriend. The 2 struggle for control of a knife, and she tells him that he can't leave her for another woman. He belongs to her. She eventually gains the upper hand, raises the knife, and just as she's about to swing it, the boyfriend grabs her by the wrist and stabs her through the heart. She falls to the ground, bleeding profusely out of her chest, almost comically so. As she lies on the ground, her necklace falls off, and for some reason, all of the blood pooling on the ground gets absorbed into it, though the boyfriend doesn't really seem to notice. Now, naturally, the boyfriend does what we all would probably do after killing his girlfriend. He takes a shovel and an axe, breaks apart the floorboards, and just tosses her body in. But just as he does, her necklace, for some reason once again attached to her neck, falls onto the ground. And in case you wondered, this is probably important to the plot. And if you needed more evidence, once he throws the necklace into the hole, his girlfriend suddenly springs back to life, telling him, "You belong to me," followed up by one of the more rational reactions to this kind of situation, hitting his girlfriend in the head with a shovel. Quite the introduction, but now we get to fast forward 30 years into the future and meet our titular bloody muscle bodybuilder. This is Shinji, the writer, director, lead actor, special effects artist, and everything else involved with this film. And we as the audience get the pleasure of being introduced to him through close-ups of just about every inch of his body. I mean, the movie's called Bloody Muscle Bodybuilder in Hell. I'm not sure what I exactly expected. But then we're rudely interrupted by someone giving him a phone call, an old flame, and an important side character, Mika. She calls asking about an old photograph of a haunted house that he showed her, and you can probably guess where this is going. The next little bit of this is basic exposition that doesn't really matter other than Shinji telling Mika that he works out. And I'll say right now this is important to the plot, but something slightly more important at this moment is that Mika is a writer, specifically working on an article about haunted locations. Shinji hands over the photo, and you guessed it, it's the house from the intro. But there's something weird going on. One of the windows is quite literally filled with the face of a ghost, clear as day. Shinji also tells us that the house belonged to his father that he says lived in it before he was married. And just before we start off on our insane adventure, there's one more photo that Shinji shares. A picture of his father in front of the same house with the woman he murdered standing next to him. And now things start to get wild. Mika, Shinji, and Mika's psychic friend, Mizuguchi, all drive up to Shinji's father's house one weekend. And yes, her psychic friend is introduced without any warning. He just is in the car. But anyway, upon arriving, Mizuguchi already senses something off about the house. He tells the two that they're being watched, having evil thoughts sent in their direction. There's a strange foreboding feeling that this part of the movie gives off. We get these shots of the crew investigating the house's exterior with an eerie track adding to the atmosphere. When they do eventually make it inside, Mizuguchi finds these unusual drawings of a woman pinned to the bedroom walls, and most importantly, the tools used to steal away Shinji's father's little secret. The next little while gives us a good layout of the house, consisting of a bedroom, a living room, a kitchen, a bathroom, and of course, a basement. However, according to the resident psychic, each of these rooms is filled with an ominous presence, one that bears a terrible grudge. So naturally, he summons said presence. Lights flicker, the tension rises, Shinji puts hairspray in his hair, all crescendoing to this moment. After getting knocked unconscious by a clock and literally summoning a spirit, it's decided that the best course of action would be for Mizuguchi to investigate the home alone. And I won't disagree with it because I know what comes next. Absolute insanity. Mizuguchi eventually encounters the full body spirit of the woman who died here. And before he can even begin to find out what's going on, the woman stabs him through the chest, takes over his body, and things go from zero to bat crazy. Mika and Shinji decide that it's the perfect time to go check up on their psychic friend. However, once they enter the bedroom, they find him lying on the ground. As Shinji approaches, their friend jumps off the ground begging them to leave, while he's still alive. But that won't last for much longer, because immediately after, Mizuguchi seizes up and the all-important necklace from earlier slides from his mouth and digs inside of his eyeball, killing him and marking the point of no return for Mika and Shinji. Now the next 10 minutes is where we get some of that classic Evil Dead effects work. I can't show a lot of it because of YouTube's aversion to fictional violence, but I can give you an idea of what happens. Shinji is successful in locking the demon in the basement because of course he is, it's an Evil Dead tribute, when suddenly the TV flickers on. And who exactly is going to be dumping exposition on us? None other than the spirit of Shinji's dad, of course. He explains what we already know, that he killed his girlfriend and now her angry spirit is after them. But she's using their psychic friend's power to keep them locked in the house, and the only way for them to escape, they have to hack his body into pieces. And the weapon that Shinji needs to use is down in the basement. So, with a plan and no other options, the two make their way to the basement door, when without any warning, the psychic drops through the ceiling and another fight begins. He grabs a hold of Mika's neck, strangling her in front of Shinji, but he's not going to let that happen. With the help of both the shovel and the axe from earlier, Shinji chops away at Mizuguchi until all that's left is a pile of dismembered body parts lying on the ground. Just like his father said, Shinji hacked him into pieces, but for some reason, all of their exits are still locked. The woman or the man or the spirit or whatever it is laughs at them, telling them that there is no escape. But there was one key part of the plan that Shinji forgot about. The weapon he needs to use is in the basement. And what is it that the two of them find down there? Shinji comes up to finish the job, but it seems that some of the body parts have gone missing. What happens next I can't show much of, but it's one of the craziest fights I've ever witnessed. Different parts of the body have connected in an almost John Carpenter's The Thing kind of way, and Shinji and Mika have to fight off each separate piece of it. But no matter how hard they fight, it just keeps coming back at them. And Mika is eventually bitten and knocked unconscious by the demon, and Shinji has run out of options. He has no idea what to do. Slowly, the woman's corpse is being rebuilt from the viscera of his friend, and Mika has now become possessed. Shinji gets knocked down into the basement and finds himself not only at the lowest point physically, but mentally as well. But that's where he has a breakthrough. The weapon he needed wasn't a shovel or an axe or a shotgun. The weapon was something he had this whole time: his muscles. I told you it was important to the plot. The ending of this film I want to leave mostly as a surprise for your entertainment, but to give you a little summary, Shinji utilizes both his incredible strength and the weights that were conveniently placed in the basement and pummels the demon into a bloody pulp. It's a spectacle for sure, nothing but wildly creative practical effects that are a little too graphic to be ad-friendly. And of course, to save Mika from being possessed, he quite literally sucks the demon out of her neck. The two have defeated the evil and are set free to live happily ever after. And that is bloody muscle bodybuilder in hell. With this film and the last one I covered, Sledgehammer, I've really grown an appreciation for these types of low-budget films. And I know I'm not the only one. There's a reason this film is so beloved and dubbed the Japanese Evil Dead. Its practical effects, its slapstick tone, it's a great time, and at only 60
Texas man is fighting for his life in the hospital after he stole a package off of a woman's front porch, only to go back to his car, open it up, and see that it was full of black widow spiders. This woman was tired of this man coming by and stealing all.
If you've seen the 2023 French-Canadian movie Red Rooms, you're likely familiar with the phrase,
What the f***? What the f*** is wrong with you? What the f*** is wrong with you?
You're also likely familiar with the fact that the movie never really provides a definitive answer to that question, ultimately leaving the guilty or not guilty verdict up to us. Yes, we know our protagonist Kellyanne has some, let's call them, neurodivergent tendencies, but as we study her throughout and question exactly what motivates her to so consistently attend the trial of a man accused of torturing and murdering 3 innocent teenage girls, a trial she has no personal connection to whatsoever, the strange evidence around those motives points us in several wildly different directions. Even when she does something that seems so morally depraved, so obviously maniacal in one scene, another scene arrives with a counter, an illusion that perhaps there was greater moral intent there than we initially thought. But lucky for you, your friendly neighborhood pretentious film bro YouTuber is here to boil it all down to the most likely and logical conclusions that can be reached based on the evidence.
And I know how to do that because I observe, because I am a novelist.
So let's talk about Red Rooms and the mystery behind Kellyanne's disturbing behavior that perhaps even she can't solve. But maybe we can. But first, Red Rooms follows Kellyanne, your average everyday rich genius vigilante hacker fashion model whose motives are drawn into question on account of she hates avocados.
Yeah, we got a word for that kind of odd in English. It's called suspicious.
Almost as bad, she keeps attending the famous trial of Ludovic Chevalier, a man accused of violating the personal space of 3 teenage girls when he kidnapped and murdered them.
Pardon my French, but you're an
And allegedly he committed these dastardly deeds in a red room, a corner of the dark web where viewers pay to watch innocent people get tortured to death. or to watch their favorite sitcom that's not on streaming. Depends what you're into. But Kellyanne doesn't just like watching her informative murder porn live and without commercial interruption. She also likes making friends with fellow murder porn enthusiast Clementine, who can see the light of good in Ludovic that nobody else can see. But that's probably just the light reflecting off his pasty bald head because he's clearly guilty. But just because Clementine's dumb doesn't mean she doesn't have feelings. So Kellyanne makes her feel like puking while showing her part 1 and 2 of Ludovic's Girls Gone Get Dismembered trilogy. Which makes Clementine scamper back home because she doesn't want to be associated with someone who pirates movies. But Kellyanne has more important things to do, like work on obtaining the 3rd entry in Ludovic's Lady in the Medieval Death Clamp trilogy. So she dresses up like Camille, the tragic teen hero of the highly anticipated 3rd film, and makes a big scene in the courtroom that causes everyone to, once again, tell a woman what she should or shouldn't wear.
I wanted to go shopping.
But it's mostly all good in the Saint modification of the 3rd act hood, as Kellyanne manages to make just barely enough Bitcoin from a high-stakes online poker game to buy Camille's video in a dark web bidding war. And at a surprisingly low price, no less. So after blowing her tier load to a shocking conclusion, Kellyanne decides, screw the patriarchy, and takes her Camille cosplay out for one last spin to Camille's mom's house, where she breaks in, turns over the new video evidence that will soon be used to put Ludovic behind bars forever, and leaves. But not before taking a quick cute selfie in Camille's bedroom first.
Yay!
What are you thinking? How are you feeling? What have we done to each other?
If we really want to untangle the mystery wrapped in a naughty enigma that is Kellyanne, we should start by taking a quick peek at a little poem called The Lady of Shalott. Given that the movie makes many, subtle comparisons to Kellyanne and the lead lady character of that story. Written by Alfred Tennyson and first published in 1832, The Lady of Shalott is about a mysterious woman in a tower who has a crush on a knight named Sir Lancelot. Yes, that Sir Lancelot from the King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table Pizza Hut franchise. The catch is that the Shalott lady is under a curse. She has to sit snug in the tower and can never look through her window and out into the real world. Instead, she must observe all outside reality through reflections in her mirror and weave what she sees into a tapestry. But it turns out Sir Lancelot looks way too hot and ready in her mirror for her not to cop a quick peek, so she breaks the terms of the curse as soon as she looks out the window. She then leaves the tower, hops in a nearby empty boat, and floats towards the city of Camelot. When she arrives, Lancelot finds her dead and has no idea who she was, or that she was totally into him like that. So he goes on to create the greatest pizza franchise known to man. Kellyanne can be seen as something of a modernized take on the mysterious Lady of Shalott. Much like her fair-skinned doppelganger, Kellyanne lives in a tower where she observes a mediated version of reality, not through a mirror, but through her screens. She has an obsession with a mythological knight that she presumably discovered through these screens, but not a knight like Sir Lancelot, more like an accused murderer knight, whose name Ludovic Chevalier roughly translates to renowned warrior knight, which is ironic because Ludovic looks more like a sickly worm than a knight. The idea being that, worm-looking or not, the media coverage of infamous murder cases tends to cast a mythological aura around accused killers, making them seem larger than life, and more interesting than your average worm. As writer-director Pascal Plante puts it,
there's screens everywhere in this film, as there are screens everywhere in people's lives, I think. The media has a good and an important place because the film talks about fandom of killer, and there would be no fans if they wouldn't create the myth around the killers, I think.
But the big question around Kellyanne is she a fan of Ludovic's? Or to put it in more Shalott-y terms, why exactly does Kellyanne leave the comfort of observing Ludovic through her screens in her tower to observe Ludovic in person at his trial? It's safe to say that, like the Lady of Shalott, she longs to participate in unmediated reality, to see this renowned warrior knight for herself. But still, to what end? Because in the final moments of the movie, when Kellyanne provides Camille's mother, Francine, with both the best and worst present she ever received, our grasp on whether it's Kellyanne's best or worst nature influencing this decision becomes rather shaky. Does Kellyanne get some sick pleasure from knowing Francine will wake up, find the thumb drive, and unwittingly watch her daughter's violent death? Or is Kellyanne more invested in answering Francine's pleas from earlier in the movie?
Papa déclaré coupable, puis condamné. On veut qu'il pourrisse pour le restant de ses vies. S'il vous plaît, je vous en prie. Je demande à quiconque qui a des informations de que j'attends des réponses.
And the outcome that results, closing the case and ensuring Ludovic spend the rest of his life in prison, was her driving intention. This then leads to a domino effect of rethinking all of Kellyanne's bizarre behavior throughout. There's no doubt something very psychologically off about a person who shows up to an accused murderer's trial dressed as one of the accused murderer's victims, but when Kellyanne finally gets Ludovic to lock eyes with her through this attention-grabbing action, is she thinking, "I got you?" Or is she thinking, "I get you"? Is she a crazed fangirl trying to get her hero's attention on his birthday, letting him know she digs his work and can't wait to see and share the final film in his snuff trilogy? Or does looking into Ludovic's eyes provide her with the conclusive evidence she needs to go all in on taking him down for good in the climax? A pivotal expression of Kellyanne's worldview is when she explains to Clementine how removed one must be to succeed in professional online poker.
Il n'y a pas tant d'émotions non plus. Quand tu trouves des joueurs émotifs, tu les déposes à mon trip, les voir toutes perdre.
Kellyanne essentially has a sociopathic outlook on life, viewing it as a game to be won. But even our interpretation of this revelation can swing both ways. Maybe Ludovic is the player she aims to exploit. After all, she did get him to finally reveal the slightest hint of emotion during her whole rude victim cosplay performance. If we run with this perspective, then Kellyanne can be understood as a Sherlock Holmes type, a detective removed from all emotion as to be impenetrable while solving cases and extracting justice against predators preying on the weak.
High-functioning sociopath. With your number.
Or maybe it's Francine and Clementine's emotions that Kellyanne's making a twisted game of exploiting. If so, Francine did have some choice words for Ludovic's fangirls.
J'ai un petit mot à dire à ces groupies, puis vous êtes obscènes. Vous pourrissez nos vies!
Which could suggest that Kellyanne's in it for the vengeful endgame of making Francine watch her daughter's gruesome murder, after enjoying watching it herself first, of course. In this case, adopting Clementine as her special B-plot project is done to manipulate Clementine into thinking she's a friend. Exploiting Clementine's emotional trust, also Kellyanne can traumatize her by forcing her to watch the torture videos and come to the sickening realization that she's been extremely wrong about Ludovic all along. Because this courtroom isn't big enough for two Ludovic simps. Or on the opposite end of the spectrum, maybe Kellyanne's connection with Clementine is genuine, and exploiting her emotions isn't for Kellyanne's own sadistic pleasure, but rather a kind of tough love, to snap Clementine back to reality, to show her that she's wasting her life by directing her empathy towards someone who way too much evidence points to being a monster. Which works wonders as it results in Clementine's swift departure from the trial. In the end, we're left with evidence for Kellyanne's motives that leads us down just about every road except any logical one. If Kellyanne is a Ludovic shill, then why'd she gather and turn over all evidence that guarantees he get put away? If Kellyanne isn't a sycophantic Ludovic lover, then why'd she dress up as Camille and take a selfie in her room while delivering the evidence to Francine? That seems pretty demented.
Dude, this is pretty f***ed up right here.
Well, if we hope to muster any sense, then we're gonna have to make like smart court people in oversized gowns and form an argument for a deeper meaning within the question mark that is Kellyanne. And by we, I mean me, because I'm your all-knowing, know-it-all YouTuber.
Did he just call himself God?
I think he did.
With all that we can't confirm about Kellyanne's objectives, she may as well be a ghost. And I do mean that literally, because that's how the camera captures her throughout, like a vague, ethereal outline of a person.
She's rooted in reality, and yet she's almost filmed like this otherworldly presence, this spectral being. So yeah, she's kind of a ghost.
A cold, blue phantom shrouded in shadow who appears in this world seemingly out of nowhere.
The film opens, she opens her eye, it's almost like she wakes up from a 1,000-year-old sleep, you know?
No backstory, no ties. Like the Lady of Shalott, she's more expressionistic than realistic, and begs to be interpreted in the context of the time her story was created. The Lady of Shalott in the Victorian era, and Kellyanne in our modern crime media obsessed era. Because it turns out that true crime documentaries and solitude go together like soap operas and wrinkly people, on account of the popularity of true crime documentaries skyrocketed during the pandemic, and really hasn't slowed. But what does our collective anticipation for Netflix's She's Dead, He Killed Her, and It's Disgustingly Tragic Part 10 say about our collective psychology? Just like Kellyanne's motives, it's the not knowing for sure that may be the most haunting. On one hand, we could say it's healthy to keep ourselves informed, to know what real predators are capable of so we can reduce our own chances of ever becoming prey. There's also a worthwhile hope that sharing these stories en masse can help solve the unsolved mysteries of cold cases. After all, millions of eyes are bound to notice more than just a handful. Yet, on the other hand, There's an unavoidable distortion of reality that occurs when real-life tragedies are curated into consumable narratives and filtered through our screens. How many senselessly sad events can one take in before psychological detachment occurs? Before a calculating, morbid curiosity takes the wheel? Before it all just becomes a thrilling whodunit to be solved? And as Kellyanne knows, one can't be the best crime solver in the business with any of those pesky human emotions in the way. Meanwhile, the friends and families connected to these cases, those who have to live with the raw, unmediated reality of these horrific events every single day, turn into background noise, afterthoughts compared to what's really driving engagement. And that's the central idea Red Rooms is poking at with a stick, which is to say it's poking human empathy with a stick to see if it's still alive and kicking in this screen-mediated day and age.
By watching so much content, by being so online, how is our empathy doing, guys? This is kind of like the big question.
The camera, like Kellyanne, acts as a floating spectral observer, going where it must to assess all evidence and subjects involved. At one point, it circles Francine while she's being interviewed, before slowly creeping in past the reporters and cameras until it's all up in her personal space, like it's a 6-year-old Michael Myers eager to see his big sister get it on, signifying media putting so much attention on a tragedy that it begins crossing the line from informative to obsessive and clinical. And I'd wager that the actress Elizabeth Locus, playing Francine's emotions as right on the verge of obnoxious, is no coincidence either, as it dares us to embrace feeling less empathy for her character's situation compared to our interest in solving the puzzle that is this case and our lead character. Something akin to the dark side of us that wants the murder doc to stop showing so many weeping families of the victims already and get to the nitty-gritty of what the murderer did next after killing their child.
Oh, we missed the murder! Did he cut them up?
The movie is essentially one big empathy test for the viewer, challenging us with characters that can't quite be pegged down as all one thing or the other. Because a hyper-screen-mediated reality doesn't just threaten to warp our perception of tragic events, it also threatens to warp our perception of any nuanced person or a situation. Take Clementine, for example. While so many movies revolving around court trials tend to cast uncertainty on the guilt or innocence of the accused, it's quite obvious here that Ludovic was the killer who committed the crime in the Red Room with the the live stream camera, and the torture toolset. Yet Clementine clings tightly to the belief that Ludovic is innocent, and she's not afraid to say so.
C'est lui la vraie victime dans tout ça.
La victime.
Which in turn attracts the media. And when it comes to modern digital take-driven media, you better align with the moral majority, or it's the social boot for you. Which brings us to the lovely hosts of More Catholic Than the Pope. If the title of this talk show doesn't make it obvious enough, then the leader of the pack wearing a Virgin Mary shirt should. This is basically a church. And like a church, they deliver moral sermons to an audience hungry for righteous condemnations of the wicked. Daring to do anything but in this Orwellian cathedral will only win you a verbal stone throwing.
Je te souhaite d'heures chez ton psychologue, puis tu nous rappelles quand t'es revenu sur Terre, okay?
Followed by swift excommunication.
Allô?
And herein lies the contradiction that is Clementine. She's wrong and spouting misinformation. She's an apologist and an advocate for an evil monster. And yet she doesn't come off nearly as scummy or inhumane as the TV personalities spouting the correct take. In fact, she's the only character in the movie that feels fully lived in, and thus more identifiable and likable. She wears her emotions on her sleeve, feels them authentically, and has a warm innocence about her.
Ils se sont trompés puis ils ont mis du sucre dans mon café. Toi, tu l'aimes-tu avec du sucre?
A striking humanity the media doesn't capture and project when its only interest is in exploiting her outrageous and absurd fault in logic. She may not be the most intelligent, but she can sense inauthenticity. She's not exactly wrong when she points out,
Jusqu'à ce qu'il ait été déclaré coupable. Puis ce procès-là, ben c'est au palais de justice. Faites juste raconter n'importe quoi pour attirer vos
a
codes.
fading shot of Clementine at the end of the scene portrays her, same as Kellyanne is portrayed throughout, as a ghost. Because she's not seen as a full-fledged human being, as more than just her foolish opinion that's being taken advantage of.
Allô, vous êtes là?
Oui, je pense.
Pensez-vous que vous êtes là ou...
Meanwhile, the ones exploiting a terrible tragedy, exploiting the meek and misguided for viewership, are broadcast and applauded on the biggest, loudest screens. More screens in our lives leads to more exposure to real-life horrors, which leads to a more urgent, pressing desire for justice, for moral correctness. But the dark side of this, the ugly side the movie captures, is how quickly this turns into an economy of exploitation, of using morality as a tool for lording power over others. of embracing self-righteousness over genuine empathy. And maybe this gives us a somewhat clearer view of Kellyanne, as a Lady of Shallot type who's spent the better part of her existence processing reality through screens and solitude. She comprehends morality as a game to be won against others, because that's what's constantly being reflected back to her. She dresses in church-like attire, but this tells us nothing about her actual internal intention, as anyone can wear morality like it's fashion. When Clementine asks her that one final question before leaving,
Pourquoi t'es là, toi?
Kellyanne goes into a sort of shock and can't answer, spiraling her and the entire movie into an almost surrealistic paranoid thriller. Perhaps because there is no one single answer to that question. And this is where the meta angle of Red Rooms comes in, because the modern immense success of the true crime industry is perhaps only one symptom of a much larger phenomenon, one where reality is endlessly distilled and reflected back to us in cut and dry binaries. Good or bad, is or isn't. Of course, it makes sense that true crime stories are presented in these terms, because they explore situations where someone either committed an act of evil against another human being or they didn't. Even if the case is still unsolved, the suspects in question are either guilty or innocent. They either partook in something monstrous or they didn't. They either are or they aren't. But it's not just true crime that figured out black and white narratives and cite the greatest amount of engagement. It's virtually every mainstream narrative projected through our screens in the modern digital age. Because a person or situation that is presented as only good or bad means there's only one side to take, only one correct answer to echo and reaffirm. And there's a religious-like comfort in that. But reality isn't that. Reality is riddled with discomforting uncertainties. And within those increasingly bolder binary lines we digitally draw between the light and the dark exists a liminal shadow. And perhaps Kellyanne is, in an expressionistic sense, that shadow. A ghost mimicking a reflection of humanity. A set of vacant ones and zeros that slowly begins self-destructing upon experiencing reality beyond the mediated mirror. When it realizes its deepest intentions in this corporeal form can't be so easily reduced to one fixed thing. That it's several identities, several motives, several contradicting truths superimposed onto each other. Kellyanne embodies the modern fear of not knowing how much the darkness of the world we constantly absorb through our screens and solitude has affected us. Of not knowing the true motives and limits of ourselves and others who now have the novel power and authority to spectate other people's lives, to get as intimate with them as they please, consent or not. Of not knowing if there's any real humanity on the other side of that screen, or just the faint reflection of it.
Guys, get ready for one of the most intense Arc Raiders videos you're ever gonna see. You might remember that back during the Arc Raiders Technical Test 2, I made one of the very first guides on how to go ahead and loot the Harvester that the Queen is guarding. And this included some of the best loot in the game at the time, but I had to team up with friends in order to accomplish it. Well, during my stream in the Server Slam, my community had said that they would like to see what the Harvester and the Queen were all about. So I decided I would bring in a free kit and try to show them how it all works. Little did I know that this would end up being one of the most insane, intense videos I think I've ever recorded. So be sure to watch all the way to the end, and don't forget to leave a like. We're gonna go right in, so enjoy the show. Alright, where are we? Not too bad. Let's go to that location. Oh, we got a late start though. We are 10 minutes into the raid. We got a Rattler, defib that we're not gonna need, bandages, and a smoke grenade. So yeah, people have been playing this for about 10 minutes. Now it is going to be a little bit tricky sneaking up from this side. I remember when I did my guide video, this is kind of the approach I took with Monty. Now, Monty didn't have the same build I had. So Monty had a build that was like this. He had the endurance build, but he didn't have the stealth build. For me, I was much less noticeable to arcs. Arcs could get very, very close to me and still not get triggered. For him, pretty wide, area that they would get triggered. He was running pretty freely across the water, and I remember him triggering the arcs. That was a pretty sketchy moment, but we had the guns to deal with them. And then you just kind of try to ignore the queen. You just don't want to get her attention. Or if you do, you want to make sure you're inside the ship. Because she won't mess with you, really, if you're inside the ship. So this is about where... I remember we were crossing when Monty triggered some of the arcs. So far, it looks like the skies aren't too bad. We've got a snitch way in the distance. Another one up there. Those are the ones that they don't really attack you, but if they scan you for long enough, they call in reinforcements. And then all of a sudden you've got like 3 new flyers attacking you like crazy. Alright, there's a queen. This is not the best approach. We need her to get around. You can see the fire starting. And the fire actually, it's purposeful. It's launching like a rocket into space when it does that. So it's not just like it's just randomly lighting on fire. No, that's like the backblast of that rocket right there. So she usually stays focused in like her direction unless you shoot at her. So we should be able to get up here. But this is not the time to go in. A new fire cycle. Yep, there it is. Comes out those 3 vents. You're safe standing here. Once those close, you're good to go. You gotta remember, I'm gonna lose my shield. Oh, come on, man. So these things go up and down at random times. Alright, I see the 1 canister, so we gotta start searching. We got 1. No, grab it. Oh, fucking hell. No! I'm sorry, queen. I'm sorry, queen. I'm sorry, queen. I'm sorry, queen. You're best queen. You're best queen.